Do you ever have those dreams that you're trying to get somewhere and there's all sorts of roadblocks in your way and you're never actually getting to the place?
I do have to have that reality as well on many
Yeah.
occasions.
So was that a little bit like that?
It was a bit like that,
Yeah.
yeah. So why?
Since I came in this morning, I have a new laptop.
Yeah.
I have all new, flashy new stuff on it.
Flashy new stuff.
Yeah.
Which is a good link.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course you're famous for your patience when it comes to IT matters.
I was more patient, by the way, than you were.
I know.
The poor man like fussing and he was trying to just install everything on the laptop and you were standing over the top of him, breathing down his neck, going, I have to go. And he just kept saying another minute. And here we are anyway. Then we get into the studio and I've no wife. So here we are.
Here we are.
We're here. And we're actually going to talk about another sort of flashy type. The brother of Mr. Flashy, who we did a pod on recently, yesterday actually, unmasking him as Glen Ward.
Yeah.
So because he was before the courts and had pleaded guilty to it was a firearms offence. His brother now, who's Eric O'Driscoll, who's a 23-year-old, we're also naming.
Yeah.
And we're going to say that he has been jailed for 5 years by the Special Criminal Court as well. The two of them have been before the court for the last year, really.
Yeah.
Waiting for these.
Yeah, it's in connection with the same offence, effectively. The seizure of a rifle and a submachine gun that was found at an address in Finglas. So what this all arose, though, I suppose the backstory of this is an interesting bit. Eric O'Driscoll lives clearly very close to his brother, but he's a good number of years younger and certainly wouldn't be regarded as of the same calibre as his brother when it comes to criminality. But nonetheless was somebody, they were always together. They went on holidays together, certainly in more recent years. But what happened in 2022, they were in a taxi in Talca Valley Road, just in Finglas, and the sort of border between Finglas and Glasnevin. And this is at the height of one of the outbreaks of violence associated with the feuding gangs that operate in Finglas. They were in a taxi. A car basically halted that taxi and there was shots fired at the two of them in the back of the car. Now, initially, it was actually just thought it was Eric O'Driscoll was there, but subsequent reports are that Glen Ward was there also. You know, not surprisingly, they got out of the taxi and fled the scene, obviously in fear of their lives. The innocent taxi driver presumably would have been absolutely terrified to be caught up in that. But after they fled the scene, guards were obviously called. There was a bit of confusion because clearly the two witnesses aren't the type to be giving evidence. But a phone was found, and on that phone, guards were able to get into it at some point, and a video was found of a rifle being fired from a house in Finglas. And ultimately, that's how this case comes about.
Now, Eric O'Driscoll is 23 years of age and his brother Glen Ward is 32, 9 years between them. It's quite a big age gap. But Eric was only 20 when this incident occurred. And Glen Ward would be seen as, at that time, at that point, and perhaps really up until now, is seen as a big target by rivals.
Yeah, a big target as rivals, one of the most famous nicknames in the underworld, no doubt about it. What happened basically when they got into his phone, Eric O'Driscoll's phone, they could see both Glen Ward and Eric O'Driscoll being a video of them firing this rifle out of a house in Finglas. And Glen Ward, you know, the court heard that this was clearly a display of strength, really. Now, Glen Ward had reason to want to put out a display of strength to people because he was he was a target for many, many people. We've spoken so many times over the course of these podcasts about the various feuding that went on across Blanchardstown, Finglas, parts of Ballymun, Coolock, various shootings, and in nearly all of them, Glen Ward's name can pop up, sometimes just as an associate, sometimes as playing a role. So he was clearly a major figure, despite his relative early age at this point. And that's why they had those weapons there, is because both to intimidate us, the court heard, but also because they were needed, because Glen Ward had been a constant target.
Now, he faces sentencing later this year for the same firearms offence. But if we have a look at what the court said in relation to Eric O'Driscoll, Justice Melanie Greeley was presiding over the Special Criminal Court in this case, a 3-judge court, and she gave him 6 years with 12 months suspended at the end of it. And she said she considered his youth and immaturity at the time of the offence, so she took that into consideration, and it was unlikely that he had the proprietary interest in the firearm, which kind of gives you an indication that Glen Ward, as the older individual, will be taking a heftier sentence.
You would think so. I mean, you also heard Eric O'Driscoll had very few convictions and had engaged fully. So yes, you would imagine Glen Ward has more legal peril to face than his younger brother.
So are they in prison together?
They are in prison together. They have been in Portlaoise. You heard in the evidence yesterday that they've been effectively on 23-hour lockup. So they are on one of the protected wings. They've not been able to mix with the prison population. Obviously, Glen Ward, and as we did in our podcast, we showed how the Criminal Assets Bureau had laid out his connections with the Kinahan cartel, primarily through Ross Browning, who has also been described as the Kinahan's number one man in Ireland. But that's probably an historic relationship. In recent years, the Kinahan cartel have not adopted and, taken Glen Ward to heart, if you know what I mean. So they're in Portlaoise. There's obviously very senior Kinahan cartel figures in that jail. People like Peadar Keating, obviously Liam Brannigan, others Liam Brannigan's just out. And really, those senior criminals dictate who can go where.
Peadar Keating would really be top dog there, I mean, undoubtedly.
Yeah. So he
has pulled away from his former boss, immediate boss, his line manager, we call him, Thomas Palmer Kavanagh, and he sort of denounced him. But he still remains kind of the...
Well, I mean, somebody...
figure of, he is given a lot of respect in Portlaoise. He's still clearly then seen as being linked in with the Kinahans, with the Kavanagh crew.
Yeah. So what
pushed sideways, really.
Yeah, but I suppose what would happen, people like Peadar Keating or others that are in there, Nicky McConnell, for example, as well, who's serving a life sentence for the murder of Garrett Hutch. People like that, if somebody new comes into the prison system, they get asked, are they going to be like the guys when they come into the prison system have to say, are they under threat from anybody? And also the people in the prison I suppose they get spoken to and say, well, he's okay with us and he's allowed to come in on this wing effectively. Now, it's obviously, if you're on one of the main wings, you'll have more access to education, exercise, going to the gym. So Glen Ward clearly is not being given that protective arm around the shoulder from some of the other Kinahan cartel figures that are in there. Now, it can be more complex, as you said. There's factions within factions. Although we would say Nicky McConnell and Peadar Keating are both members of the Kinahan cartel, they're separate factions, even within the prison system. Nicky McConnell has some associates, even of Brian Rattigan, that he seems to have tied, linked up with, where Peadar Keating, even though he's disassociated from the bomber wing, seems to have still had some decent relationships with other people like Liam Brannigan, certainly when they were both in jail. So it's way more complex. But either way, nobody is saying Glen Ward and Eric O'Driscoll are, they're okay and they have our backing. So they've been on that protective wing. There's other people in there that are associated on that particular wing in Portlaoise that would be associated with some of the Limerick gangs and have had problems. Other people that have been associated with Jason Hennessy Sr. have also were placed on there. for a time and not really accepted to within the main wings. So I suppose it shows Mr. Flashy, for all his fame, is he still up the top?
If you took away some of the, if you were able to actually just condense how many people are in there because of phones, I think it would be quite an amount. Isn't it amazing? Like, so this gun was discovered in a house in Finglas during a search in the February of 2022. And it was a military grade submachine gun wrapped in black plastic, but it was the video on the phone that really was able to link the two of them to that gun. And that was, the phones are lethal.
They are lethal.
Is everyone not going to...
Yeah, because I think the arrest occurred in the aftermath of the gun seizure. So the gun is seized.
Does no one get rid of the phones anymore?
Well, you see,
what
this
about
is
burners? Is it just that because of these encrypted phones that everybody just hangs on to their...
Well, I mean, it's if you think about it, right? What happened was the weapon is seized. Then a few months later, the phone is seized after the hit attempt, and at no point there is a physical connection made. So the guys aren't, when the gun is seized, they're not present.
Fingerprints, DNA, nothing like that.
They're not present. So the phone catches up with them. That gun is seized. They remain free. The phone is then, once they get into it, they can put it all together, and they're absolutely, without that, they'd be walking free.
And really, that flashy crew, that mob, have been the sort of TikTok generation, haven't they, of gangsters? They've put everything out on the phones. They've put warnings. They've put sort of all sorts of videos.
Look, I mean, the
street and
lie detector tests.
Yeah.
I mean, Caelan Smith, who was a good friend of Glen Ward's, he put out a lie detector test to suggest, where he sat and did a lie detector to disassociate himself with a murder. So it's been second nature for them, hasn't it? Social media. I mean, there's no point being a gangster if you're not on social media with it.
Well, not obviously that generation, but I mean, it's extraordinary really to see how it's developed and how they've kind of lost all sense, or maybe they didn't have it in the beginning that the older criminals would have. I mean, there's absolutely no way that a sort of an older, more experienced criminal would have a video floating around identifying them as shooting.
No, I mean, if you look...
weapons. Now, we have seen over the years that, in training grounds in countries where it's legal, where you're able to go to, in some Eastern European countries, I think people used to go out to learn to shoot and all that. And they will put up that kind of content, but there's nothing illegal about that.
No.
You're doing it under, in a country where you can do that. But to think of a kind of a veteran, the likes of, say, let's look at Padder Keating, the likes of him doing a video of himself shooting some sort of a weapon in Ireland would just be unheard of.
It would be unheard of. But I mean, I think I was being flippant to saying, what's the point of being a gangster if you can't video it? But that is part of the mentality.
It is, yeah.
That it wasn't, the aim was not just to make money and to live a good life and to rise up the top. The aim was also to generate, being a bit of a celebrity. And that has caught a lot of them. But exactly, I mean, modern police work has become the existence of digital communications and CCTV and DNA. It's just catching so many of them so regularly over the period of time. If you look at a lot of those Kinahan murders, they're nearly all solved by. I mean, I know there was actual, attempted hits stopped mid action, but so many people have been swept up in the aftermath through CCTV and digital communications. I mean, it is amazing. And if you look back in historical terms, when we would have started writing about crime in sort of the 90s and the 2000s, I mean, the rate at which gangland murders were solved was so low, because effectively you had to have a witness, didn't you? I mean, that really was a lot of how you could be caught.
Or if you were linked to the gun.
If you were linked to the gun through ballistics. And if you look back historically, even DNA was, treated as a bit of a, it's not proper evidence. I mean, all of that thoughts are gone now. But, there were so many unsolved murders because without a witness, and of course you wrote about one of the most famous cases with Joey, where you actually had a witness to convict somebody. But without that, it was very, very hard to get a conviction if you weren't caught mid-act. So those days are gone. We saw in the Regency, but many other trials as well, how, there's CCTV everywhere. And if you look at, say, even somebody like Rue Redmond, who we also spoke to, he was effectively convicted on these little pieces of the puzzle being able to be put together. It is definitely...
It's getting harder to be gangsters.
It's getting harder to get away with killing, with a gangland murder.
Sure is, yeah. Or with, maybe just a little bit of advice for anyone out there, maybe don't video yourself with a gun either.
Well, that's awesome.
Having said that, Eric O'Driscoll is a young guy, 23 years of age. He's after getting 5 years, 12 months suspended. He's going to be out. He'll have served a bit of time.
Yeah.
He's going to be still in his mid-20s by the time he gets out. And his brother, Glen Ward, probably facing a lengthier sentence given what was said about Eric. At the same time, yet again, he served a bit of time and he's still going to be a young man. They're going to be back on the streets and, the likelihood is that they will make connections in prison, unfortunately, that they probably didn't have when they first went in there. It's going to be tough if they continue on that 23-hour lockdown, if they have to, and if they continue to feud within the prison system. But nonetheless, they will do their time and they'll probably be out before we'll be making another few podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Eric O'Driscoll, I think he serves something like 9 months on remand. He will get an automatic tariff for good behaviour or for, so yeah, he's not facing a lengthy period of time. But in the sentence, the judge gave him a year suspended and recognised his young age and gave him the opportunity for rehabilitation. And interestingly, he's made a commitment over that suspended sentence not to associate it with 6 named people. So he's been given a chance, and we'll see how Glen Ward fares.
Exactly. Okay, thanks, Niall.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.